I'm Councillor Wendy Catch, Chairman of the Committee. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting on Governance and Ethics Committee, which is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. We will start with the minutes of the last meeting held on the 3rd of September 2025. Can I accept the minutes as true and accurate? Thank you. Apologies for absence. I'm going to hand over to Democratic Service Officer No, I'm not going to move. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that Councillor Nugash is now the Chairman of the committee and Councillor Paul Brill is now Vice Chairman. In respect of apologies, we have apologies from Councillor Brill for other reasons and the substitute is David Clark. Apologies also from Councillor Walter Gurley for other reasons. The substitute is Councillor Martin Wright. Councillor Chris Alioki of Gibbs's apologies for other council business. And the substitute is Councillor John Stevens. And we have also apologies for other reasons from Councillor Hannah John. There's no substitute. Thank you.
Thank you, declaration of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. You should state the type, what type of interest it is and give me the details. Thank you. Item on the agenda 4, local government and social care ombudsman's decisions, August to October 2025. I formally move the recommendation at page 12 of the agenda pack is that members note the findings of local government and social care ombudsman and the lessons learned and actions taken against the findings and improve future service delivery. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor David Clark, second the item reserve the right to speak.
I second that. Reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I will now hand over to Richard Aston to introduce the report.
Good morning, everybody. This report is for complaints that have gone to the Ombudsman. We've had findings from the Ombudsman between August and October. The last time, which was February to August. I think what I wanted to point out was our complaint volumes have gone up slightly, but the decisions we're getting from the Ombudsman, or people that are going to the Ombudsman, is less. And also we're getting less investigations done, which I think is a positive. Of course, we have to learn from the ones where they do investigate and find fault. There's a couple of cases that are in here that have been that are in there with the learnings documented with departments. But I wanted to highlight the fact that I think it is quite positive that we are learning generally from complaints, and there isn't really a trend of the same issues cropping up each time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I would now like to invite views and questions from members.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think what we have to bear in mind is that we're looking at 2 cases here out of thousands of interactions between our departments and officers and people that we represent. I always say, with my old land manager hat on, it's how you treat the complaint. You treat it as an opportunity to learn, or do you treat it as burden? And I think that we do the first this council, which is good. I would say one with regards to SEND, one of the problems is the acute underfunding that councils have right across the country, not just this council. We've been able to provide what these children need. And yes, there has been a huge rise in it, mainly because of the pandemic, and also because we know more about it now. There's more diagnosis. Whereas, years ago when my niece went to school with dyslexia, she wasn't given extra help. She was put in a remedial class, and things have moved on substantially since then. So I think we have learned lessons from these cases, and we should not forget that this is 2 cases out of thousands of people that we deal with.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I believe we have Councillor Stephen Pearson next.
Thank you, Chair. I accept the comments of my colleague. What I would say, though, in terms of the complaint from Miss Y, I'm a bit disturbed that there was an EHCP in place that said a tutor should be provided who was trained and experienced in working with children with autism and anxiety. And yet we appointed somebody apparently who wasn't trained in that respect. And the lady concerned then had to hire her own tutor who was appropriately trained on top of the cost until this was dealt with. I just wonder if there are issues there about selection of providers and maybe whether our procurement policies prevent the right people from being employed to carry out the role.
That's a fair point, and I can take that back to the department. However, they also relying on what the school tell them, the company that they employ for the tutor. There's a bit of a misunderstanding from what I gather on this case in terms of what experience means in terms of how they deal with those particular type of children. They have, as I say, as I put on the report, the department have put steps in place to ensure that they're checking, and there's more formal checks in place to ensure those kind of things happen. This is a unique case in terms of they've not had anything like this before, never had any issues with tutors, as we know with SEND, as Councillor Carr alluded to, it's around availability provision that's more the issue, but that's calming down slightly. There's always going to be an issue at the moment whilst there's underfunded, but the tutor side of things, I think, is a unique situation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Bruce Lawson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I support the Ombudsman reports coming up to this committee. I think it's an extremely important process that this council does. I'm just following on from Steve actually in his comment. Really, it was set up on the basis that we were looking for a trend. And if a trend occurred, then we did something about it. We got the officers concerned, which is, well, versed in that, got the officers concerned in front of this committee to be able to answer for the actions that were being carried out by our staff in their working capacity. So it was long may it continue. It's a good process, and in inverted commas, it works. And Steve has been a long member of this committee, and has watched members of staff come and go over that period. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Are there any further questions?
Any idea about the time of this? Because I say this because I'm in another place. I'm chairman of the Governance Ethics and Standards Committee, and we have these reports. And one of them went back to 2003. Some of the officers present, they've just been born in 2002. So I just wonder how old these cases are.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Can I ask Richard?
Yeah. I can't give the exact date, but I do know, I mean, we're talking a year or two for these cases, because it has to complete a complaints process, then it goes to the Ombudsman, and it depends how long the complainant takes to go to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman can take several weeks or months to actually investigate a case.
Thank you, Richard. Do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised and points made during the day? Yeah. The report is noting the vote is not required. Is the committee happy to note the report? We'll now move to item 5 on the agenda, the Council Divisional Fund, Auditing and Monitoring Update. I formally move recommendations included on pages 35 and 36 of the agenda pack that the outcomes of the audit and additional monitoring activity be noted, that all county councils be sent a further copy of CDF policy, reinforcing the need for applicants to meet the relevant requirements, including the provision of receipts where requested, the public acknowledgement of the council's contributions, and the prohibition on funding salaries and main office rents, and to committee considers the issue of running costs and agrees the level of detail required in application summaries. Do I have a second, please? Councillor David Clark, second the item.
I second that item.
Do you reserve the
I
right?
reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I will now hand over to Democratic Services Keith Ford to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, everybody. This is the annual update of the Committee on the Councillors Divisional Fund, just to share the outcomes of the recent audit and additional monitoring activity. The audit looked at a small sample of 11 applications and the outcomes were largely positive. The only real concerns were that not all applicants were able to provide receipts and less than half were able to provide a record of how the Council's fund had been formally acknowledged in writing. As I outlined in recommendation 2, and it would be very helpful for councillors just to remind applicants of those requirements. In terms of the additional monitoring, the specific categories that the activity looks at, the main findings were the vast majority, but not all, of the 23 individuals who received payments were able to provide receipts as required. There were very few concerns in relation to the 21 organisations that had received £1,000 or more funding, other than 2 of the responses referred to part of the money received being used to fund staff or admin team, which runs counter to the policy. And again, it's another area we're looking for members just to remind applicants about. In relation to the 4 new groups that have been established with the help of CDF funding, all requests for information were met, although 1 of the 4 was unable to provide receipts for the £100 funding they received. And of the 7 payments to district borough councils, most have provided the information requested, although we haven't received any response at all for 1 of the payments. So we'll continue to chase up some of this. So obviously, it's as live as it was at the point that we put the report together. It is worth noting that in total, the payments subject to the audit and additional monitoring add up to more than 25% of the total spend in the last financial year. So hopefully that gives members very assurance that this is largely operating within the intended scope of the policy. And just in relation to recommendation 3 at the previous meeting, 3rd of September, members did raise concerns that general description of running costs, whilst within the scope of the CDF policy, may not give a level of detail that give members appropriate assurance. So since that meeting, Democratic Services officers have been seeking more detail for such applications. But it's worth noting that this has been found to have a bit of a negative impact on workload and the timeliness of some of the payments that were making. And then later, that I just wondered whether members want to just consider that further and perhaps agree with the instances in which further details would be sought, if not in all cases. For example, a minimum financial threshold to seek further information. The report also includes a little bit of information about alternative potential county council funding streams, because one of the things which we'll ask councillors to do when putting forward applications is to consider whether there's other streams available within the council that may be more appropriate. And the local communities fund the strength is just closed for the talent that have these programs are up to. And I'm happy to answer questions, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. So I would now like to invite views and questions from members, please. Councillor Mike Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a few things around this. Knowing using CDF in not just here, but also at Gedling Borough Council. One thing occurs to me in the process for a start. At Gedling Borough Council, the actual applicant applies directly through the Gedling Borough Council website. And it occurs to me it gives an opportunity to prompt the applicant at that point that they need to withhold receipts in order to do this. That's something I would like to see here. It sort of feels like it's an opportunity missed to get that initial nudge to them. I have a bit of an issue around the trust aspect as well. I think, I like to think that the organisations that I deal with are always upwards of front and honest with me about what the is for doing it. The receipt aspect, having to be prompted by a councillor as a result of that, feels a bit like it's an overstep on our part, and I almost feel like it needs to be in the process rather than in any discussion that's held with the councillor and the resident. And as far as the scrutiny is concerned in the long term, it feels to me that we should be scrutinising the list itself and what those items are on that list, as in what's come from them, are they right, are they appropriate for what we should be doing in CDF ourselves, and looking at that and sort of focusing in on that, because I know we obviously had to create a response as a result of an issue that happened within the council. I think it's been an absolutely necessary process to do that. You know, we are out of that now. And I'm not saying that we revert to the previous process, but what I do think is we need to look at if this process now is a step too far, and if maybe we need to find a way that gets a better balance between us and the people that use the service. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the money that we are giving out is not our money, it's not the council's money, it's the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adams. All very good points. In terms of the process, the notion of the applicant being the person who makes the application, we did look at that as part of the review of the policy. So the most recent review of the policy, that was something which officers had suggested could be one way of approaching it at the time, because we're aware of some of the districts offering it that way. At that time, the members who were involved in that policy review weren't really in favour on that approach. They preferred for it to be member-led, really, and for members themselves to be doing sort of encouraging people to make the applications. In terms of that point about whether it's appropriate for members to be the person who remind them to keep receipts and the like, really, it's more as an additional prompt to the information that does go out. So every communication that goes out from us is reminding applicants that they need to do this. But obviously, when we come to them, it can be a year down the line if they've been selected for the audit. It could be 11 months after they've actually received the funding. So sometimes it's, and I think it is worth making the point, although not everything was 100% clean bill of health, I don't think we'll have any real major concerns with most of the applications that we looked at, which were a good, as I've said, a good quarter of the expenditure in total. And in terms of going through the list of applications, so ordinarily this audit process would be done as part of that annual update that would provide the committee. That actually came to the last committee, so members have had a list of everything that's been funded. We do also publish that on a monthly basis as well, so there is that opportunity. Normally this report would have been a couple of paragraphs within that report, but because of the election this time, because we had some staff absences, we weren't able to do that in time, so which is why we brought it a couple of months later. As I also mentioned, the process still is in just working its way out, just so we can keep on chasing up those people that haven't responded as well. So we'll continue with that.
Thank you, Keith. I believe Councillor Mike Adams has a further question on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to follow up on that. Thank you for those answers, Keith. I just wonder if there's a technology assist here. When we fill out the email address on this form, and we effectively save the form, is there an auto email that can go out to that email address that's been the registered user that clearly says, please keep your receipts?
As I mentioned, they do get that when they get the actual the funding. Basically, when they get the funding, they get an email saying that this money will be in your bank account shortly. So they are getting that. We did try to automate a few more of these checks and balances. We found the system probably wasn't able to do some of the stuff that we wanted to do. It just tended to some of these things were going backwards and forwards on occasion. And it's often because we're dealing with relatively small amounts of money for relatively informal groups as well. I think that is something. So
absolutely.
That one that I mentioned where we didn't have receipts, but it was for £100. It was to cover taxis for people to attend the craft workshop on a monthly basis. We didn't have any concerns that the money hadn't been spent on that, but it was just that notion of something a bit more formal from somebody that was a pensioner who probably wasn't used to dealing with those sort of things.
Right.
But I think there's always a balance with I said, we're trying to strike it in terms of what we're doing. And it's definitely what you say about the process. We're strengthened it at the time, internal audit, looking at it at the point. And I think we'll have a stronger process than what we have in the past. But I think it's very also what you say about it. It's got to be a degree of trust with
yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I believe we've got Councillor Bruce Lawson next.
I'll go. We're on a fight. Yeah, you've got to be careful with this one, haven't you, Keith? You know what I mean? You contact the Royal British Legion for wanting receipts on a road closure. And the road closure, it's not Dibsy County Council. You know what I mean? It becomes a bit of a joke if you don't watch it. So you've got to, it's horses for courses, isn't it, as far as this is concerned, and don't overdo it. Otherwise, you're going to, it's just creating bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, you know, and we have got to trust these people to a certain extent. And the whole rationale of sorting this out was actually of publishing what people spend and how they spend it. And that is the time for us to scrutinise anything that we want as far as members is concerned. And that's why we did it. And to be quite honest with you, it worked. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Next we have Councillor Neil Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it actually has probably already been answered largely. Because Keith used the word balance and used the word trust. I think those are the crucial words, really. I think I do agree that it should be the councillor that puts the application in, because that in itself is a bit of an informal scrutiny, because the councillor has made the decision that this is something worth supporting, and therefore that should be a signal to the council stroke auditors that the councillor believes that it's a valid application. Of course, it has to be formally checked, and I agree that the auditors should be able to have evidence that it's being correctly spent. I suppose really my question is, I just hope there is no inference that it should become incumbent on councillors to ask for receipts, because that is just going to be horrendously time consuming and OTT basically. So yeah, I think the trust element is important. We are dealing with largely voluntary community organisations. We're not dealing with big corporations. So there has to be a sense of reality that we are dealing with people who just want to do the best for their communities. But it's just got to be relative and balanced, as you said.
I'm happy to take that approach in terms of that notion of just seeking further clarity as well about running costs, unless members have any firm view about that. I think it was yourself, Councillor Clark, at the last meeting had concerns that is that sufficient, and perhaps it would we make a judgment call as to those circumstances when I think we need to get a bit more information. Because sometimes we get a good instinct ourselves where we're going to need a bit more information. We definitely weren't expecting members to receiving those receipts. It was more about just that drip effect that the more they hear, the more likelihood it is that it's going to sink in, and that receipts might be available at the year and come across. Part of the issue is obviously with an audit, it's a bit of a random sample. We do flag up anything that we think would be worthy of to look at the year, and it's a relatively small sample. And part of the issue is people wouldn't necessarily know that we're going to go and ask for that additional level of information, whereas the ones that the policy does specify are open to that additional monitoring, that the other ones that were very upfront right from the off, we want to need all this information from them. So I think with individuals in particular, that came about through the internal audit, looking at also potential area of risk.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Seacon.
Thank you. Some councillors may know that I've been here 20 years, so I've got quite a bit of experience of seeing how this works. And one of the issues will be what happens is in February, all councillors get an email from Sarah saying, deadline for CDF is such and such a date in March. And some councillors, and it's the majority, will sit there and go, I've got £2,500 left, and if I don't spend it, it'll look bad. And I think that is where possibly the situation with actually going to people that aren't using it for what they're saying it for arises, because there's a rush to actually get the applications in, which puts strain on your department as well, because you get them all at once rather than in trips and drafts. I have to say that it is the minority of councillors So I think perhaps we should make a bold recommendation that business managers receive a monthly email, people in their group, and how much they've spent and how much they've got left. So we can actually go and talk to the councils and say, look, you know, you don't want to leave this right at the end.
Yeah.
Do it throughout the year consistently and not leave it right at the end when you phone in families, because I've seen it happen in the group staff meeting in the past. They're phoning people, do you want to take money? You want to take money? Yes, please. So I was just wondering whether that would be a good way forward as to actually prevent the problem happening in the first place.
I'm happy to take that project, members are happy with that. It's certainly, it's something that will be in the always underline that thing about trying to spread your famous throughout the
You're not passing your work week on to the business managers, you can say.
We do that.
Down the group business man.
No, you're not having
Some
it.
might,
Do it.
Well-run groups already do it.
That's very
It
true.
is, that information is published on a monthly basis through Control, so you know, everybody's aware of
Yeah.
who was spent on it as well as themselves. And what we do have is as well as that additional, for the system, they can go and check the balance as well, where the members will be keeping that work like able to.
What's easy in business managers if you say, can't, to be honest with you.
I'm more than happy to do that, and it's helped with business managers as well.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Next, we have Councillor Cathy Mason.
Thank you, Chair. It was just when you said, initially when you send the receiver the money, you tell them or ask them, please can you save your receipts? And we're not just adding that because you have to do an audit and you may be selected. I know that's a little bit, but the fact is everybody knows that audit is a formal process. And most people, I bet, or I assume the people I'm meeting, are very nice people, are volunteering, and they're more than happy to do whatever to say thank you for the money, like with the photo check, give you the publicity, etc., etc. You've got no problem. So I think if we ask them initially, please, because it belongs to an audit, we might not come back for 11 months. It warns them. And then when you do, it's not such a, oh my God, I don't know.
I'll be perfectly honest on this. I can't remember what it actually says. I'm not sure if it currently does refer to for audit purposes, but if it doesn't, we'll can strengthen that and get that out of
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Next, we have Councillor John Siemens.
Thank you, Chair. With a risk of going over old ground, I've got to agree with my colleagues here. Trust is quite important. In general, the public have a distrust of politicians anyway, and if we seem to be hassling them too much, it needs to be a two-way street. And just for my own benefit, Keith, you say that they send out emails, thank you for your application. How many communications is there with the applicant before it's lines drawn under it?
From what I recall, there's two. There's basically one saying it's in progress, and then there's one to say that the payment's on its way.
Payments being made, and each one of those does remind them to keep any receipts.
I think it's the final, our final email to them on the lines what they need to do now that they're receiving the money. So again, if there's a way of
perhaps stick it in both of them, just a nice. But as Councillor Clark says, I don't want to be the person saying you might get audited on this and it could reflect on me. Can I make sure I'm seeing a receipt?
Yeah. I think it's part of this, just thinking that you have that initial contact with them, you're explaining the requirements of the scheme in very broad terms. So if anything we can do to help strengthen that for ourselves, but obviously we are doing that as officers.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Siemens. Thank you. So do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised and points made during phase?
Should we just get, so in terms of Councillor Carr's proposed amendment as well, are people happy to have that board recommendation that we send the information to the group business managers, and obviously it would be down to them how to deal with that.
Okay. So we're now moving to the vote on the recommendations at page 35 to 36 of the agenda pack, with the additional recommendation suggested by Councillor Carr. So is that agreed? All those in favour? Any against? No abstentions. Thank you. So now we're moving to item 6 on the agenda, member complaints update, which is page 43 of your agenda pack. I formally move the recommendation at page 46 of the agenda pack is that the committee notes the content of the report. Do I have a second, please, Councillor David Clark?
I'd second that. Reserve rights.
Thank you. I will now hand over to Charlie Mason to introduce the report. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first in what's intended to be an annual report showing the number of member complaints received over the previous municipal year. In this first report, noting it's the first report, we provided a full municipal year showing 24-25 and up until the end of September for this year. So members have got an idea of a comparison as we move through it. Within the report, we've broken down some background to how member complaints are addressed under our adopted code. And within the report, we've broken the complaints down largely into 3 separate tables. So what the complaint relates to broadly, what the outcome of the complaint was, so whether there was any kind of breach, whether there was no breach, or whether a local resolution was reached, and also what the source of the complaint was, so who submitted the complaint. We've tried as best we can to provide information that will give members and public an idea as to what the basis for most of our complaints is, or if there are any patterns that can be discerned through them. Obviously, we need to be mindful that we don't want to give away either the personal information relating to the complainant who's put it in, whether that's a member of the public or otherwise, or relating to the subject councillor. So hopefully we've tried to strike a balance there that will give people an idea as to what is being complained about, how things are being resolved by and large, and where the complaints are coming from. Within the table, and also note that quite a lot of our complaints relate to social media. That's consistent across this year and last year. We have had an uptick in complaints this year. Presumably that's driven partly by the fact it's been an election year, we've had an influx of new councillors, and so that's driven some of the complaints. And we'll see what that settles down over the coming year. But if you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to address them.
Thank you, Charlie. So I'd now like to invite views and questions from members. Councillor Martin Wright.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the job. I'm looking at this report, and it's quite obvious. I mean, looking at the number of complaints for last year, May 24 to 30th of April 25, only 20 complaints, and in the next 5 months we have 21. It indicates to me that the power of social media and the way people get upset by comments on social media. Can I ask Charlie, how many of these 21 complaints have ended up face-to-face one-to-ones with either yourself or Marge? Is everyone a one-to-one, or do you sift through these complaints before you address them?
I couldn't say off the top of my head. I would say probably the majority we end up having a conversation with the councillor to try to explain what the process will be to get their perspective on it. Where the complaint is relatively straightforward and it's a matter of fact what's being received, we will try and resolve it via email to try to minimise the impact on the member and also try to reduce officer time being spent on it. But for the most part, if members would prefer to have a conversation, we're happy to do that, or alternatively prefer to have an email, that's something we're happy to do. If things were to move on from that initial sifting stage where we have the conversation to work out whether it meets the necessary criteria for progression, later on in the stage there will be more of move for formal investigation, there would certainly be an onus there from, I suspect, the independent investigator to have an interview. But we would try and be flexible about keeping it proportionate to what the complaint is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Cathy Mason, sorry. Councillor Mason.
I'm going to say, this is probably one, I'm going to go, you don't go on Facebook very much. No, I don't go on Facebook very much. So social media, when we get complaints, do we actually find out where they're complaining from? Because it's a worldwide web out there, and there could be in Kentucky, and we've upset some American person, which we don't want to do, but do we actually qualify where they are from because of different interpretations of our language?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I'm going to hand over to Charlie Mason to answer that. Charlie Mason, sorry. I knew it would happen sooner or later.
No relation. We don't have any kind of criteria within our code of conduct to say that someone has to be from either the local area before they submit a complaint. A complaint could come from anywhere in the world. From the complaints that I've seen come through, quite a few people do reference the fact that they're local residents, but we don't do any kind of verification to check, what their address is or anything, because it's not necessarily pertinent to what the substance of the complaint is. Where it was a matter of kind of interpretation, where someone from outside the UK, for example, might be misinterpreting something that was on social media, for example, we would go with what the interpretation is within this country. We might be trying to understand what the councillor meant when they were saying something that caused offence. But generally speaking, I think we would be relying on an English interpretation rather than an external interpretation.
Can I just add something? So we don't just go looking for social media posts that make comments about members. We wait till somebody says, I want to make a complaint is. So I think that's a really important first test. And then we've got a triage system to go through various phases to say, does it make the basic entry, be the basic entry test, and then decide where we go from there. So just keep that reassurance.
Thank you, Marge. Any further questions from members? Do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised and points made during the vote? Thank you. The report is for noting, and the vote is not required. Is the committee happy to know the report? Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7 of the agenda, which is regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 annual report, which is in the pack. I formally move the recommendation of the agenda pack. Committee notes the content of the report regarding activity for the January 2024 to September 2025 period. Do I have a seconder, please? David Clark, that's David Clark.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. Ms. Overrice.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Emma Hunter to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This report is to set out the council's activity under RIPA and the Investigatory Powers Act, which we call the IPA, since the last report, which was submitted to the committee in January 2024. There hasn't actually been any RIPA or IPA activity since the last report was submitted. The report also gives an update on training that's been undertaken by authorising officers, which took place in December 2024, will be offered in December 2024 again. And I actually undertook some training with some new authorising officers on 19th of November this month. Training standards themselves access external training on a monthly basis. The report also sets out compliance with the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, the IPCO. So every year we submit an annual return that sets out RIPA and IPA activity, or actually it's only RIPA activity for that report, on the 31st of January every year, which we did last year and I will do next year. And the report also sets out the outcome of the remote inspection, which was carried out by the IPCO in July this year. The recommendations and progress are set out in the report. most of those recommendations have been actioned, and the remainder are being actioned. I'm happy to answer those questions, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. So I would now like to invite views and questions from the members, please. No, thank you. Okay. Sorry. So, sorry, Councillor David Clark.
I'd like to ask what the process is for gaining approval for this, and what typically would approval be given, i.e. a threshold. Just give you background for that question is to work for National Council Office Aid at that time was being aware of what approvals we have to do. So therefore I'm trying to gauge if we your side.
Yeah, so in the last few years when we have undertaken for activity, it's largely been training standards dealing with illicit tobacco and vaping products. So the threshold for a crime that's to be investigated is a maximum sentence of 6 months in prison for the offence, or the sale of alcohol to underage people. So in terms of the test for whether RIPA should be used, officers consider necessity and proportionality. So you have to use a method to obtain the evidence that you're looking for in the least intrusive way possible. So, for example, if there is a means of gathering evidence in an overt way that doesn't require covert surveillance, which is what RIPA deals with, then that should be used first. It's only when that's either been exhausted or it's felt that there is no way of doing it overtly, i.e. you might tick them off sort of thing, that they would then move to making an application to use RIPA. Now, the process for that is that the investigating officer will complete an application form, which is then submitted to the authorising officer to give authorisation to. The application for surveillance can only be made for a period of 3 months, even if the officer thinks they need a day. You still have to make it 3 months. The magistrate will grant that application, and then the activity commences. As soon as it's finished, officers have to apply to cancel the authorisation. So you can only actually survey a property, etc., for the amount of time that the authorisation should arrive. If they're not getting the results that they want, it is possible to apply to extend the authorisation by further 3 months, and that can keep continuing, but it must always be cancelled when it's either not needed, it's finished, they've got the evidence, etc. That's it.
Is that authorising officer in council, or does that have to go to
There are several. No, there are several authorising officers. So the monitoring officer is. We have various group managers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Any further questions from members? So do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised in points during the debate? So the report is for noting and a vote is not required. Is the committee happy to note the report? Thank you. So now we're moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which starts at page 51. I want to formally move the recommendation at page 53 of the agenda back, please, that the committee notes the content of the report. Do I have a second, please, Councillor Starr?
I'm happy to second that and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Charlie Mason to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. This is the committee's regular report on whistleblowing activity. It covers the calendar year 2024. You can find in the appendix a summary, as was stressed by members in the previous year, of the management plans that we've had reports that we're receiving under the policy and the outcomes. I just want to note that one of the outcomes is still yet to be concluded, and the other to give clear indication as to both what the complaint was and what the outcome was. In comparing the number of complaints we've received this year, it's lower than last year, still slightly higher than in previous years, but I think not at a level that would pose significant concerns around the volume we're receiving. And we tend to focus more on the content of the complaint rather than the number we're receiving in any case. The whistleblowing policy was agreed for review last year by the Governance and Ethics Committee. That is in the process of being rolled out. We're just sorting out the publicity arrangements around that with our communications team. That should go live imminently. The previous policy was entirely rewritten to be replaced by a new policy which was felt to better address particularly the responsibilities that the council has around reports coming from anyone other than our employees or workers, to be sure that we're guiding people's expectations appropriately around what we can offer them under the Act. And the report is to note, but have to take any questions from members.
Thank you, Charlie. I would now like to invite you some questions from members. Councillor Kathleen Racer.
Morning. Why aren't councillors covered? I know they're not covered in the law. Whistleblowing just covers employees, sometimes workers. Well, councillors are not employees, so we're not covered under your whistleblowing policy. Now, some councils do extend it to councillors. Now, I want to know why Nottingham County Council has not.
I'll just say, Chair, that was going to be my question as well, so there we go.
The policy as drawn, both the previous version and this version, is intended to reflect our legal responsibilities under the relevant Act. So the primary focus of the legislation is around preventing victimisation of people who put in a protected disclosure. If we were thinking about, as you mentioned, councillors aren't employees of the council. So thinking about protection we could actually offer councillors, I'm not sure what form that would take. Principally, councillors are responsible to council and to each other in their interactions. If something were reported through, for example, a monitoring officer that councillors have particular concern about how something was operating, I think those concerns would be taken seriously and acted upon appropriately. But we can, if there are particular proposals people want to make regarding this, we can take it away and think about it. The policy does sit under the Governance and Ethics Committee.
Thank you, Charlie. Kathy, Councillor Mason, have an additional question?
Basically then, I know the law doesn't cover councillors, it's quite clear, it's employees. As a union rep, knowing that there's a trade union involved somewhere along the line, councillors should be covered. To me, it doesn't matter, we are across departments many days, so see sometimes more than officers could ever possibly see. I truly believe I should take any concern, monitoring any concern seriously. But I think for the individual councillor, councillors should be covered, and it would be best practice to include everybody that's in this building, not just employees.
Charlie, do you want to respond to that, please?
We can certainly take on board members' comments. I think the thing we would have to try to establish if we were amending the policy is what form of protection we're offering councillors under the policy. Whether it's, I think that's what we have to try to capture.
Thank you, Charlie. Councillor Mike Adams, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it just sort of feels a bit like overreach to me in this. I sort of, we are governed by our own code of conduct as well as anything else. Which covers all of this. So I don't see adding any more coverage would do us any favours. It's like insuring your car twice. There's no point. If you crash it, somebody's going to pay off. It's a similar thing with this. There's no point having double insurance, in my opinion. It just adds an extra layer of bureaucracy to a process that already works.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Steve Palm.
Sorry, Councillor, but I disagree. The code of conduct doesn't cover being able to whistleblow something in confidence. And whilst we have March at the moment, who's a very able and very trustworthy monitoring officer, that might not always be the case. And I think the ability, and I've come across this not at this place, but at another council, where I've wanted to report something in confidence, otherwise I might have been actually taken to court or sued. I think is a huge issue for a councillor, because of that, like I said, all councillors work because of that. Yeah, if there was a whistleblowing policy in place, something could have been said without the risk of that councillor being taken to sued or legal processes being done.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'm happy for us to have a look at, take the points you raised, and just have a look at that. But also Charlie's points about and some of the reasons why we didn't include it. But I'm happy to have a look at how we could, yeah, what we could do in that space. What I'm wondering is whether we do it as well. But we'll look into that and get back to you. Yeah. Thank you, Marge. Do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised in the Funds Committee today? Councillor Stevens.
Sorry, I'm not an officer. I wasn't making myself obvious. I just want to basically pick up on what Councillor Adams just said there. We are protected by our own Nolan principles and things. We have a code of conduct. I would also, I'm going to say this, would like to remind Councillor Adams of something he said back in May. You are entering a viper pit. I think if there started to be a whistleblowing policy that's applied to councillors, it potentially could open the door for, let's say, rather nefarious behaviour.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think I'm probably right.
Yeah. Spot on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. So, if you don't mind me repeating again, do officers have any additional comments in response to the issues raised during the debate? Yeah. Thank you. The report is for noting and it's not subject to a vote. Is the committee happy to make a report? Thank you. So we're now moving on to item 9 on the agenda, corporate risk management update. Starts at page 57 in fact. I formally move the recommendations included on page 61 of the agenda that the contents of the corporate risk managers report be noted in the risk management framework be endorsed. And a further report be presented on subsequent components of the risk framework committing to fulfil its responsibility and oversight of the effectiveness of the council risk management framework. Do I have a second, please? That's the big part.
Second that, I'm reserved the right to speak.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Nigel Stevenson and Ijaz Patel to introduce the item.
Decided.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
I'll sit in the middle. Thank you for that. In the usual style that I present these reports to you, I'll take it that the report's read. And for those that are new to the committee, we always bring corporate risk updates to you. Firstly, to give you the role of, you've got the responsibility for the oversight of risk management. What that means is you're looking to get assurance from us as Audit and my colleague, Ijaz, as the corporate risk manager, that that framework is there and it is being followed. What we don't look for is that we'll go through every entry in the risk register here and go through that detail. You as the committee are taking assurance that that's happening. From the work we do with the organisation change board, through the work that we do with CLT, that framework exists. So that's really just setting the scene for those that haven't sort of received an update before. The key thing to pick up is that that work is ongoing. on 6 weekly basis, we meet with the OCB. They go through the detail of the risk register. Each of the departments have their own risk register, and that detail is covered, and that escalates or de-escalates with that risk management process as you would expect. And then as with Simon, usually, Simon as an auditor doesn't make this up either for risk. We are governed or we are covered by the Institute of Risk Management, and we also take external assessment, if you like, from Zurich. Zurich are one of our principal insurers, but they are also one of our principal risk management advisors. And they do what they call on here a health check. So they're also doing an audit of us to make sure we're in the right frame, we're doing things the right way. And the most recent one of those in April this year said that we were, as it says in there, making significant progress. And that's thanks to the work that Ijaz has done and his team in actually developing the framework that we've got and actually making sure that departments that work across the council are complying with that and making sure they're doing it in that way. But for us, risk management and the framework is an ever-moving beast. And one of the outputs, which was really helpful for Zurich, was to refresh that framework. And that's where we are with this. We have a refreshed framework and we've simplified it. We've made a simple statement in terms of the framework, but supported it there with 4 key components as we identify onto paragraph 9. What we're doing today is actually starting at the beginning, introducing that to you. So introducing the framework. There's going to be a strategy. We've already got one. We always have that, so we can work to that strategy. We are developing the next phase, risk appetite statement. It's something that council hasn't worked to before, and it's something that Zurich recommended, but we're actually actively working now to put those statements in place, which will determine the amount of risk we are wanting to be exposed to. Therefore, we can look at the resources and the way we actually work. That's supported in terms of the teams who have a risk management toolkit. So they can use this toolkit to assess their risks, score them, measure them, compare them with others. And that's when those get compiled into a risk register. And that's the journey we're on. All of those parts in various ways of development exist. But we're just bringing to you as an initial output where we are. So the first thing looks at that fundamental introduction of the framework. We will then bring back to you, as those develop, identification, if you like, for risk management statements. We can then give you an example of the toolkit and then give you sort of examples of what's on those risk registers as we take. But for today, and as that first initial introduction to risk management and giving you that update, we just wanted to make sure that you can take assurance as a committee from our work that is taking place. That in line with your terms of reference to have responsibility for oversight of the effectiveness of the council's risk management framework, I can give you that assurance that it's a framework. Framework's being worked on. OCB are looking at it. CLT look at it. Members of departments look at it. So just for today, that's as much as really I wanted to do as an update. But firstly, I also wanted to introduce Ijaz to you, so you'll be seeing more of it as we go through. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon, and thank you, Ijaz. I'd now like to invite views and questions from members, please. Councillor Cathy Mason.
Thank you very much. For somebody that's not used to that information, appreciate it. How often do you come back?
At the moment, our framework and strategy is to bring you an update every 6 months. So we can bring that back to you. If there were bits you wanted in addition, if you wanted any further sort of background or training into what risk management was, we can arrange that. And myself and Ijaz will take you through the detail, because it's the detail where the devil is, as usual. It's probably not the thing you want to debate around this sector. So that's really
Thank you, Councillor Mason. You've got further question.
Basically, thank you very much again, because I probably will at some point, especially with LGR happening, that's going to throw the monkey wrench into everybody's department, I suppose, eventually. Thank you very much.
So we'll get through the meeting. Just to come back, be assured again, we know through the work of OCB, there is a register of risks and risk identification for LGR, and that is built into our process as well. So again, be assured that that's happening in that.
Thanks, Simon. Have I got any further questions from members? Okay, we're going to move to vote. We'll now move to the vote on recommendations at page 61 of the agenda pack. Is that agreed? Fabulous. Any falls? Thank you. Unanimous. Votes concluded. We'll now move on to item 10 on the agenda pack. Internal audit strategic plan 2026-2029. I formally move the recommendation included on page 66 of the agenda pack that the committee approves post-strategic internal audit plan 2026 to 2029. Do I have a seconder, please, Councillor?
I'll second that and move it to the last.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Simon Lacey to introduce the item.
I will, Chair, but my laptop's just dying out. So again, in my usual style, I'm assuming you've read the report. I'll give you the background as to why it's here. Over previous committees, we've talked about internal audit standards and how they have changed to the global internal audit standards, and now it's what we do. So again, Simon doesn't make this all up. He has to follow these set of rules and requirements. Part of that is to make sure that internal audit deliver your term plan. Okay? And we've done that over the last few committees, and I think you've seen those reports. But they also require, Simon, to have a set of standards and a strategy of how actually the committee, the council want internal audit to be delivered. So this goes back a step, and it sort of fundamentally sets out how the council would like that audit to be, or audit provision, service to be delivered. So it covers the purpose and strategy of internal audit. It looks at the delivery model. So it looks at, the council looks at, we deliver an in-house service. We support our service with expertise by you buy in some expertise in the ICT, because we can't keep up to speed with that all the while. And we buy in if needed investigatory expertise indeed as well. So that's the fundamental of where we want the strategy to deliver. We also then look at what the council wants its assurance over. So again, picking up the remit that we have a term plan, that's the way the council will decide that's how that wants to operate. And we look at the key things that we do. So in terms of that delivery, we've already spoken to you about assurance mapping, continuous audit, the things that happen in the background, along with the development of counter fraud, claims activity, and with undertaking pieces of governance and assurance work within that plan. And if those of you recall, the terming plan is fundamentally built up of those sort of 5 areas. So that's where we actually want to deliver and the way we want to deliver that work. We then reinforce through this strategy that we want to continue to have an agile and responsive way of delivering that to you. And again, that supports what we do in that terming plan. And then we actually make out some quality and value for money. We want to provide with value for money. We want to be quality. So we do get those 5 years external quality assessment. So again, Simon's not marking his own work. He's actually having somebody externally look at that process. And fundamentally, this document sets out how we would like that strategy, or you as the committee would like that strategy to be set out in order that we can then work on that, resource up and deliver those term plans in that collective way. So that's really what that strategy document is for. It's the first time, so I think it's usually lasts for about 3 or 4 years. So it's now ready for refresh to start from 2026. And that's what we'll build up. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. I would like to invite views and questions from members, please. No? Thank you. We will now move to the vote on recommendations at page 66 of the agenda pack. If you agree, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Vote concluded. We're now moving on to item 11 of the agenda pack, which is internal audit term 1 progress and term 3 plan 2025 to 2026. I formally move the recommendations included on page 83 of the agenda pack that the committee notes the outcome of the internal audit work carried out in term 1 of 25 to 2026 and plan coverage of internal audit work in term 3 of 25 to 2026 to be progressed to help deliver assurance to the committee in priority areas. Do I have a second, please, Councillor David Clark?
I second that reserved right.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Simon Lacey to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take the report being read, and if you can just think of this report, I think we've seen internally planned report and collective. It links in with the previous item. Thinking of those bits that are in the strategy, you'll see the more detail in this terming plan as we go forward. So, firstly, I'd just like to do the bit that talks about our performance. So, over the previous term, the performance has been good because on, I think you're page 81 or appendix 1 to this report, those rainbow charts give the overall position. The target was 273 days, we've delivered 267, we've done 17 jobs, etc. So we're on that productivity of being where we want to be. Appendix 2, in terms of the indicators, gives us, we've achieved those indicators that we want to do in that particular, in that term. It also, though, unfortunately highlights a couple of problems that are likely to be coming downstream. Unfortunately, one of our team is on long-term sick, and one of our team senior auditors actually retired earlier in the year. We've actually started that recruitment process. We did make an offer earlier in the week. Unfortunately, that person's withdrawn. So we will be restarting that recruitment process. It's an ongoing thing. We're always having to recruit. It's not an easy recruitment process to do, but we continue with it. But what you'll notice on the report is on page 6, you'll see the usual Manhattan. And the number of days that will be available to us going forward into term 3 is limited. And for me, as the head of internal audit, I'm putting a marker down that that is probably about as low as it can go. We need to make sure that we do recruit now and get those resources in place. Otherwise, we can absorb that for a 3-month period, but going any further into a whole year with only having that 187 days will cause us some problems in delivering that time. But let's hope we've been on a prudent basis. I've followed my colleagues in accountancy and we've taken a prudency basis and we've actually worked that out at the lowest possible. So if it happens and we get recruitment in, it will increase, but we set our plan at that level. So in terms of the plan going forward, which is included on appendix 2, you'll see that we've got a plan of work. You'll see that a lot of that work continues to be work that started in this term because we are short of resources. There are only 2 or 3 new pieces of work to cover. So we're going to consolidate and be agile, as we normally are, focusing on those corporate requirements, focusing to continue on counter fraud. Anything that's a must do will be done. The bits that won't get done will be those particular assurance engagements within the department. So I just really wanted to raise that with the committee. I'm confident that we can actually deliver that and it will be okay for our opinion for this year. But for going forward into 26, 27, it will put a strain on it. But let's be hopeful and hopefully we can get those resources back in place. Otherwise, we'll have to take other options and certainly bringing those resources in. But at the moment, we want to stick with that strategy of having an in-house team and bringing those resources in only as and when we need specialists in. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I'd now like to invite views from members. So I've got Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you. Sorry for that honest report. I think I, for one, and I'm sure the people on the side of Thursday on it, basically, that's what we did. And I think, obviously, all the members will speak, but I think the message from this committee, the council committee, to officers that this is a priority, recruitment is a priority, because we cannot let internal audits slip, because that exposes all sorts of risks. So I'd just like to say that perhaps we should be sending a message this committee feels that priority should be given to recruitment.
Noted, thank you, Councillor Carr. Any other questions from members? Councillor Lawson.
Yes. Simon, I thought we'd set up a graduate scheme to be able to help you out with your recruitment. Quite a few years ago, I just wondered what was happening with that, because we are dropping low. It appears as though 43 is all you're always low anyway. Whether you all go on holiday at the same time. But that's just my point. And your spreadsheet on page 89, so you can take your hand off there a second. So, thank you. Sorry, we're drinking the same book, so I can
Switch the recording off.
I can give him what for. Now, there's one or two of the high area risk areas. I'm wondering why you've got assurance mapping in your high area risk, because you're well on with assurance mapping, aren't you?
Yeah.
And the process is in inverted commas mature. It's there or thereabouts. The other one is why we're going down local election cost analysis as well. I was just wondering why that was a high assurance area that you were looking into. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Simon.
So thank you. And yes, you're right. We have apprentice schemes, and we actually this month, the first fruition of that will happen because the apprentice we have is fully qualified and will be part of the team as well. So that has worked in terms of that. Unfortunately, during that process, I think we started with 3. We only ended up with 1 because 2 of them dropped out of that apprenticeship. But that is where we are actively looking to recruit. Unfortunately, that's also where 2 of the providers in the market have dropped out. So at the moment, we want to recruit additional apprentices, but the route to actually get them through that IIA qualification, we are still working through because they've actually come out of the market. So yes, we try, and that is a very valid, and they are posts that we would want to fill as soon as possible, because again, it's difficult to recruit senior auditors, so we want to grow our own through the organisation, as you know. In terms of the appendix, which we put on, I can't read myself, it's too small. In relation to assurance mapping, I think at your point it's got the H for high risk. For us, that is high risk that we need to do it. In fact, we don't want to let that go. We just need to make sure we complete that work. So to us, that H in the high risk means that is a key thing for us to do. So we can't afford not to do it. So it's high risk that we complete it in that regard. And the other one on the elections, we've got a specific ask from management because I think the cost of the local elections have gone up when we operated it, and charged through the districts have increased. So they wanted us to look at that to give the assurance that we understand the reasons why those costs have actually increased. So that was why we were asked to do it. We were asked to do a specific piece of work on that election again, where we can be responding to management needs in those particular areas.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Clark, do you have a question? No. Councillor Neil Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just looking at Appendix 2 again on page 89, and I just noticed we've got the budget forecasting for send transport, etc. And I'm probably still trying to get the scars to heal from previous years when I held that particular post. And budget forecasting, I'm sure that Nigel keeps polishing his crystal ball with great glee every day, trying to get some indication of what the figures are going to be like. But I'm just query on the right. It's obviously a high risk. It is high risk. On the very right of the table, it says potential scope for assurance, and against that send item, there's the word that says the forecast outturns varied. And I think it's the word varied. I think that's the operable word, because I'm just interested that in the previous year, I had notice of there was an extra overspend of £8 million, an overspend, not the total spend, above the original forecast. And the trend is, and we're talking about tens of billions of pounds nationally are going to be spent on send transport. So it's only going to keep going up and up. And that's against, I'm led to believe, a potential wish that the expenditure for send actually is going to be going down, which is a laudable aspiration, but I'm not quite sure how one achieves that. I'd be just interested to know, in terms of auditing and forecasting, how, when the costs are going up and being overspent all the time, how can we equate that with a wish to actually cut that spending?
Go on, Nigel. You must have been wearing your suit.
Thank you, Bruce. I've come smart today.
I know. We always worry when you do that.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for the question, Councillor Clark.
Are you?
Oh. But, as you know, quite rightly, it's one of the high-risk areas for the council in terms of its budget, in terms of the amount of spend on SEND transport, just as it is in terms of children's social care generally and adult social care generally. And it is particularly because of the increases during the year in terms of the forecast and what year end is the request I made specifically to Simon and the team to actually review our processing of the forecast in terms of our mechanics and therefore the intelligence that goes into that forecasting. I get assurance that that is done correctly and to the highest level it can possibly be done. I'm sure it is, but it's the right thing to do to ask internal audit to give that and us the additional assurance that it is. Doesn't necessarily mean in terms of how we manage, you know, the cost is the cost in terms of it's going up because the needs are different during the year. But as far as the process goes around the assurance that we get that that has done correctly is what we need. Yeah. The budget question, probably leave that for our overview committee tomorrow.
I'd be interested to see if we're asked the same question in a year's time, as to what the answer will be then.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any further questions from members? The report is noting and so not subject to a vote. Committee happy to know the report. Thank you. We're moving on to item 12 on the agenda, which is the external audit completion report 2024-2025, commencing at page 91 in the pack. I formally move the recommendations included on page 93 of the agenda pack that committee notes and comments upon the external auditor's audit completion report 2024 and 2025 and delegate responsibility to section 1.1 officer in conjunction with the chairman of the Governance and Ethics Committee to approve the statement of accounts 2024-2025 on completion of all external audit work. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I would now like to invite Mark Surridge from Audit and Mazars to introduce the item.
Thank you and good morning. Again, just for clarity, I'm the external auditor. Our responsibility is to provide you with an independent objective opinion on the council's financial statements as well as wider arrangements around value for money arrangements. There's two reports embedded in here. The first covers the, and I will apologise for 55 pages of work on the financial statements for the council, and then a further long report on the pensions. I'll take them separately because whilst I got an opinion on the council as a whole, somebody else does the work on the pension fund. So like to delineate between the two, not necessarily blur over. The work on the financial statements for the council is substantially complete. We are pretty much at the stage of just completing essentially our quality review procedures. And those stay live until the very last minute we issue the report. There's nothing unusual about that. And the status of the audit is set out on. Sorry, I don't have your pack numbers, but there is a page called Status of the Audit which tracks things. Some of the work has progressed since the point at which we issue the report. I can tell you now just at that quality review stage. The rest of the report goes through quite a lot of detail from the point at which we set our audit plan, where we identified where the risks were in the financial statements that we really want to concentrate our time on, to the point where we get to conclusion. So there's some repetition of what our plan was. The important thing I would say about that is the plan that we set is the plan that stayed in place. What that means is there are no new risks emerging in the financial statements from the work we've done that require us to go back, reassess, and carry out more work. So that's a good position to be in. The conclusions we've reached broadly say that we've obtained the assurances that we needed and concluded that the accounts present a true and fair view, materially accurate. There have been some adjustments in the financial statements, a few areas that we really looked at in detail, mainly around things like valuation of land and buildings, which is highly judgmental, and there's a number of underlying estimates that underpin that. We also look at the pension scheme, because again, that's quite a complex accounting transaction that underpins that. This year there was a new accounting standard that was introduced called around lease accounting. It's affected the whole sector, so there's additional work that goes in this year, because not only do you want to look at what's there, we have to do a completeness check of what might not be there. So there's some additional work that we do around that, as well as looking at things around expenditure recognition, making sure expenditure is recorded in the correct financial year. Again, all of those have come out with a essentially materially accurate position. The piece that I would draw your attention to, because it does go in what we call our management representation letter, the unadjusted misstatements in the financial statements. As part of our completion process, what we do is we ask management to sign off a representation that they've given us all that they need to do, and they're satisfied that the items that we've identified that we think are potentially incorrect don't have an effect on the accounts. So the committee should validate and support that assertion, as they are in section 6 of our report, which says summary of misstatements. There's a lot in there. The key thing that I would say, well, I said a lot in there. There are items in there, but the key thing is none of those are in excess of our materiality threshold. So we would propose that they are adjusted for. However, we can accept them not being adjusted for on the grounds that they are not material to the accounts as a whole. This is quite common practice, but it is something we would always just say, these are the matters, officers have chosen not to adjust them. We're okay with that, but it has to be presented to you as those chartered governors. That's broadly it in terms of the financial statements of the council. We do have responsibilities around value for money. I repeat myself a lot when I say this, is that we do not issue an opinion on value for money. It might be called that, but that's not what we do. So we do carry out an assessment of 3 aspects: the council's plans, procedures, and controls around financial sustainability. So budgetary controls set in the financial plan. We look at governance, so that's risk management arrangements, the head of internal audit opinion, for example. We also look at corporate performance planning, performance monitoring, and the results of any reports by regulators. So we look at all of those areas, and we take an assessment of whether or not they are adequate or not. That's the benchline. nothing more than adequate on. That work is complete. We're satisfied that there are no significant weaknesses in those arrangements. There's a lot of wording, but essentially that's the key thing. That piece of work is supported by something called the Auditor's Annual Report. We'll submit that and share that once we complete the work, because again, it stays live just in case something comes up. With that in mind, that's the end of the accounts on the council. There are, I suppose, the council is in a place to be able to approve the accounts and delegate those through to sign. There's no reason why we can't do that. We can't issue our opinion until we do that, so that has to be done at some point. There is one matter arising that could cause us a delay in our reporting, and that's around electors' rights and objections. We've received some correspondence that we just need to run through and make sure we're satisfied whether or not that has an impact on the accounts. So we will do that. That could cause us there's a risk of delay in doing our work as we react to something that's only recently arrived. I can't go into any more details about it, so please don't ask me about that. That's it on the accounts. What I thought I'd do is I'd pause that one before talking about the pension fund, so you can get through it.
Thank you, Mark. Can I just invite Simon, Nigel, Stephen, just to make a comment regarding the council's perspective on that?
Yeah, we're in active discussions with the external auditor in terms of trying to resolve that issue so that we can get through signing the technical bit of signing the accounts off, as Mark has said. Quite rightly, we're getting to that point where we could, just got this slight bit.
Thank you, Nigel. It's you, Mark.
Okay, so I'll just check. Is there any questions on the accounts paper for the council before it goes to the pension fund?
Councillor Mason.
Morning. I read through, didn't understand a lot, what they go on to auditor. But around the sale of land, you made a point that the previous system worked better than the current one of buying and selling land or valuing land. There's a discrepancy around that. I wonder, when you put your recommendations in this, or do the council act upon the recommendations? Does that become our plan for the next year?
Would you mind just putting me to the page, because I don't think it's about sale of land, but I just want to make sure I get the right.
I think it's valuation of it.
Okay, so and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Okay, so as part of our work, as part of the council's preparation of the financial statements, the council identified that the valuation approach on an asset, essentially broadly you have two choices. And the previous choice, the choice made was not the right basis of valuation. That basis of valuation is an accounting valuation. I'm really clear about this. It's an accounting valuation. It's not sale valuation. It's not its open market value. It's an accounting valuation based on its value and use. Through the work the council did, we validated that information that requires change, and the accounts have been changed for that. So it has no impact on estate strategy. It has no impact on market valuation and trying to sell assets in any way, shape or form. The only impact is the figure that goes in the financial statements. And obviously, because we issue an opinion on the figure that goes on the financial statements, we just want that approach correct.
Thank you very much. I've got totally the wrong end of the stick. Well, thank you for putting me right. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Bruce Lawson.
Just to say, this report's good. actually. I was previous chairman of the Governance and Ethics. In fact, I set the Governance and Ethics Committee up 10 years ago. So, yeah, your report is really, really good. It's well set out. It's easy to read, and you're to be applauded for the work that you put into it. So thank you very much. I could cross-examine you on a few other issues, but it is effectively, we were in control, and that you are reporting on our last year in control. And it was brilliant. It was a really good year we had, but you top it up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
And you can put that down on your list of us self-congratulating ourselves.
Mark, would you like to continue?
So to round it off, we have the opinion that sits on the pension fund itself, and again, it's 36 pages driven by auditing standards. Again, I'll go even quicker on this one. Essentially, the executive summary and status report confirms that, again, the only aspects outstanding are the quality control procedures, which in part is come here, letting a report, and then getting our letters back from the authority. There are no significant controls, reports, control entities. Again, there are some unadjusted items in the accounts, which have no significant impact on financial statements. Again, we just bring those to you. The reality is those changes are borne by the fact that at the point that setting financial statements, valuation investments are based on an estimate. We come in later in the year and we know what the actuals are. So it's just moving those figures. Those movements then get actualised as part of the 25-26 accounts. So they get realised and they'll run through the accounts themselves. So there's no loss to the council ultimately from that. It's just a movement. However, we're required to say those are the differences, suggest that should be changed, and officers come back with a view over whether or not they're material on the accounts. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mark. Do I have any further questions or views from members? Thank you. So we'll now move to vote on the recommendations at page 93 of the agenda pack. If that's agreed, can I ask all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. So we're moving on to the final item on the agenda, item 13, the work programme. Before I move on that, I'd like to invite Noel to speak to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you all know that there's an error on the entry for January 2026 in that the internal audit charter, it wasn't agreed previously that should go to the March meeting rather than to the January meeting. So with that, the work programme appendix is in front of you for your consideration.
So can I just, so I've just looked at it, and actually in March 2026, you have the auditor's annual report. I think we could bring that into January if that's exactly what would work really nicely for us.
Good, it's really good.
Just one.
Okay, I just wanted to raise one other item. So also on January, we've got the Constitution Review Working Group outcomes. I'm going to suggest we put that back to the 4th of March to leave more time, and then we'll be taking that to the council on the 20th of March. So that'll fit nicely into this item.
Well, there you are.
Thank you.
It's Christmas almost.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any further amendments to the work programme or any amendments at all indeed to the work programme? Is that agreed? I will now formally close the meeting. Thank you very much.